Hey friends, it's Mike Myers here with the Songwriting for Guitar podcast. Can you believe it? We made it to episode number 20, and I can't think of a better way to celebrate than to have legendary songwriter James McMurtry. Artists like Sarah Jarosz have covered him. Jason Isbell has brought him out on tour. John Mellencamp describes his songwriting as James writes like he's lived a lifetime. And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. We're going to talk about his start in songwriting and his inspiration. I am just thrilled that he had the time to sit down and talk with us, and it's one of my favorite talks. So we're going to jump into it. Episode number 20, James McMurtry. So I've known of your music, your songwriting for years. I remember it has to be maybe around the early 90s. My dad he would play this cassette of Candyland, and that was my introduction to you. And I remember just playing that album over and over. And for me, I always have questions. I got to see you in 2018 when you were with Jason Isbell, and I'd love to know, what was your introduction to guitar? When did you start? Was it an early in life thing or kind of like midway?
I think I was 7 years old. My mother taught me a couple of chords, and I just went from there.
So when you started playing guitar, was it ever formal lessons, or was it kind of like as you go along and you kind of pick by ear and then just choose what you want to do and just kind of slowly take it in?
Yeah, I never had formal lessons. I just stole what I could.
Well, it's kind of the best thing to do, is because I feel like sometimes it's learning by ear. You choose the things that you enjoy and what you gravitate towards, and it's just like, cool, I'm going to make this my own.
Yeah, well, they say style is based on limitation, as John Hartford said. So I don't know. I didn't learn guitar in a conventional manner. I still can't play like other people do, but so I can play like I do. So I guess that's enough most of the time.
And I feel, that's kind of the discovery of when you're being a songwriter and artist, it's finding like your voice. And there are some people that are great players, but then when it comes to songwriting, they're just like, well, what should I play?
Well, yeah, it's kind of different muscles. And you can run into trouble trying to play a song because you get lost in a guitar solo and then suddenly you got to think in English. And, David Bromberg told me you got to give yourself at least, 4 bars to get back to English before.
Now, when you were picking up guitar and you started to play through, what are some early songs that you enjoyed just, listening to, that you're gravitated towards and you were just like, this is interesting?
Well, I remember the first one I learned to pick out note for note was Wildwood Flower. And I remember the day I learned it is on my friend's mother had a Yamaha nylon string. And I remember I was just messing around with it one day and suddenly out came Wildwood Flower, and it's like, oh, wow, I can do that.
When you learn by ear, do you feel like when you know the song really well, just kind of like inside and out, you don't have to force it or find it on guitar, it kind of flows a little bit?
Yes, sometimes. Other times you do have to, you really have to practice. I found lately I've been doing these, live streams, and it's just a whole nother thing because you've got a camera right under your nose, so everybody's right there in your living room, and anything can distract you in ways that it wouldn't on a stage in a club. A fly on a computer screen can just drive you crazy, or the dog's barking at the wrong time, and you better have your solos practiced and rehearsed if you're going to do that. You can't be fishing around, which unfortunately I have been doing, but I've been getting better with the practice thing.
Now, for you, especially now with, as you were saying in those live streams, what do you find are some good practice methods or things for you to just like walk through?
Well, I haven't really got that far. I'm trying to get back into guitar because, for a long time there, when I was young, I sat around the house playing. That was my escape, and I could go for hours playing, and then after, about 30 years of touring and regular gigs during the week when we're home, the guitar came to mean work to me. So if I'm just home sitting around, which I am these days because there's no touring, it's taken me a while to get back into just picking up a guitar and playing it for the fun of it. Because, it used to, even if I were home, if I were off the road, I'd have a Continental Club Wednesday night, Continental Gallery Tuesday night, and then weekend gigs. And if we're on the road, we were playing 6 nights a week, so I didn't touch a guitar when I wasn't working.
Which you mentioned the Continental Club. I have some friends in Austin. I thought this was so cool. And I remember you mentioned this when I saw you live, and you were like, if you're ever in Austin, and you gave the date, we're always here. I think that's still so badass that you guys, and it's also too, like there are local folks that are playing in between, and then you're the band goes on at the end of the night.
Yeah, well, I'm local too, really. I live in Lockhart now, 30 miles south, but it's still local. That's our home gig, and hopefully it will be there if and when things open up again. I don't know. I think the club's been closed since March. That's another thing. I don't know if touring's ever going to come back, because the agencies are saying 2022 at this point. Okay, what existing independent clubs are going to be there in 2022 if there's no business between now and then? I'm sure all the Live Nation gigs will still be there, just like Chili's will be there in the restaurant world.
But Live Nation is the Chili's.
Well, I don't know. See, I think they've done some good stuff too. I think they're the ones. There's a new club in Brighton, Massachusetts that we played. Mm-hmm. Brighton Music Hall. I don't know if that's Live Nation or some other big one, but whoever did that gig, that's a great room. I mean, they set that thing up right.
Now, for the years of touring, when you started out playing guitar, when did you start to make the connection into songwriting? And so it's no longer just, or was that the way that you always viewed it?
I don't know if I viewed it as well. I mean, the people I knew as songwriters played guitar because that's what they could play. I don't remember worrying about where songs came from until somebody introduced me to the music of Chris Christopherson. He was the first artist that was introduced to me as a songwriter. Up to that point, I didn't, I wanted to be Johnny Cash when I grew up. I hadn't put any thought to where Cash's songs came from.
Do you remember some of the early songs that you wrote, some of the first ones?
Well, the first one I ever finished that I would play for people eventually became Talking at the Texaco on the first record. Though when I first wrote it, I was playing in like beer gardens around San Antonio for, $50 and free beer, if that, and mostly cover songs because that's what they wanted. That's what to get a gig like that, you had to know a couple of Jimmy Buffett songs, and then the food and beverage guy would say, "Okay, hire him." So I started. I worked that song into my set sometime in the mid '80s, and I guess the next one was Crazy Wind. And I had them, I just mixed them in with the cover tunes. I believe Texaco, I wrote the bridge to that actually on the way to the studio. When I played it before, it didn't have a bridge.
Wow. Do you feel like sometimes, now when you're writing songs, does it come in bits and pieces, or does it come in skeleton structure, or can it just, it kind of always changes a little bit?
Yeah, it usually comes in bits and pieces, and it can take years. It's a good thing somebody invented the laptop, so I can just file all these things on a hard drive, and I don't have to be, going through boxes full of legal paper like I used to.
Now, your first record, and I want to make sure I get this right, but your father is Larry McMurtry, who's a very famous writer, definitely screenplays. That you met John Mellencamp, and you kind of somehow got a demo tape to him.
Well, he hired my father to write a screenplay for a movie that he eventually put out, but they were supposed to get together for a rewrite meeting, and I was done with Texas. I wanted to move to Nashville. I knew some people there that were staff writers and some that were fairly successful pitching songs, so that I wasn't really looking for my own record deal. And I thought I'd go join the Nashville crowd, but I had a little, 4 or 5 song demo that I had used to get gigs around San Antonio, basically. Mm-hmm. Well, and I guess this might have been a different tape. Yeah, this one was all original. But I had 4 or 5 songs by that point, and And Larry and John were supposed to get together, so I gave the cassette to Larry and said, give that to John. I was hoping John would want to cut one of my songs so that that way when I got to Nashville, somebody would rent me an apartment. Because you get in Nashville, everybody's a songwriter in Nashville. You can't list that as an occupation. They want to know what you do for money. But if I'd had a John Mellencamp cut, they would have understood that. I mean,
yeah.
But John didn't want to cut my songs, but he was interested in producing for some reason. So he got me the record deal with Sony. Actually, it wasn't yet Sony. It was still CBS, Columbia CBS. And
Okay.
It was, but yeah,
Wow,
that's how that worked.
That's interesting. So when you were writing those songs, you were thinking, I've got people in Nashville, I got friends in Nashville. That's the route I should go.
That's the route I figured I could go. I didn't know anybody that had a deal as an artist.
Yeah.
I knew people that had publishing deals or were salaried staff writers, that kind of thing.
Now, how was it when you were comprising those first couple of records? Because those were probably with Columbia. Mm-hmm. Did you feel like there was enough give and take in the songs that you were making? Like you had creative control over the things that you wanted to do?
Well, John produced the first one, and nobody was going to mess with John Mellencamp at that time. He just put out Lonesome Jubilee, which was multi-platinum. So he was executive producer on the second one. There were no A&R guys in the studio on either of those sessions, so it wasn't really a matter of my creative control. It was more like, in the case of the first record, John, he's a producer, and I pretty much did what he wanted, and I was happy with it.
That's awesome.
Wanchik produced the second one, and it was all, what I came to understand at that point was records are collaborative, unless you are artist-producer. Then it's just a major collaboration. I give them the songs and the vocal and some guitar and maybe some arrangements, and then later on I got to produce my own records. So it changed over the years.
Do you feel like too, like in that sort of back and forth collaborative, that there were points where it was like he suggested an idea and you were like, wow, I'm going to take that for the next 20 songs that I do and just file that away?
Well, it's a lot of production tricks. When we made those first couple of records, that was 2-inch tape. We didn't even have an automated board. They had like an old Neve 24-track. I guess a Studer 2-inch machine. And so, you couldn't fix things like you can now in Pro Tools. You couldn't move beats around. And we weren't doing click track. We were doing more like Rolling Stones approach. So, you take you use the take with the most life in it. And if there was a little dip in the groove or something, then you'd use trickery to fool the listener around it. And John was real good with percussion. He'd say, Kenny, go in there and hit your bongos or hit your tambourine right there just a couple of times. That's sort of distracts the ear a little bit. And I used that later when I was producing. And even before, some of that Lloyd Maines stuff that I did for Sugar Hill. Mm-hmm. Maines gave me a lot of free reign. I used a couple of Mellencamp tricks to fix some stuff that, some weird little groove problems that we had in a couple of tracks, and it worked. And so, by the time I got to producing myself, I'd already worked with Mellencamp and Wanchik and Don Dixon and Lloyd Maines, and I learned a little bit from all of them. So that really helped me. It didn't take too long for me to use up all the tricks I remembered. So like the last couple of records, I've been hiring outside guys again because it's time to go back to school.
Do you find too that there's something about a band playing live that's not using click that sometimes captures the energy more, or just the feel?
Yeah. You get the magic take that way. With a click, you're building stuff. But then there are bands that can play to a click and still get magic,
Yeah.
I mean, there's guys like Waddy Wachtel and Kenny Aronoff. They can stand in the middle of a full auto firefight in Lebanon and make pretty good music. But most of us mortals aren't that way.
Do you find the most joy playing live, or is it also in the recording process, or do you find it could be a balance of both?
I like live better. I don't like the studio. Studios tend to be claustrophobic.
You've toured around, so many times around the world and playing different venues. Are there concerts and shows that stick out to you as some of your favorites?
There are definitely venues I like. I like the Park West in Chicago, well, pretty much anywhere in Chicago, really. Fitzgerald's Martyrs. But yeah, the memories of the road is kind of a blur. I don't.
I will say from seeing you live, your band is insanely tight. I was watching it and it just seemed you guys strolled up and you started playing and I was just like, it would, not a beat missed. And at one point your guitarist walked off stage for a second and I was like, I think this is getting to the solo part. Where is he? Where is he? And he just casually walks back on, straps on his guitar and just plays along. I was just like, that's so badass. I was like,
was that one of the Isbell shows you're talking about?
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a regular drummer on that. We had Jeff Botta. Darren couldn't make that run. Actually, but I don't know. We did a couple of Isbell runs, actually.
This was maybe in January of 2018. This was right after he just won a Grammy, and I was just like,
that last run. That was Botta. Yeah, we had a different feel.
But it was wonderful. And when you write songs, I notice, and you've talked about this too, it's a lot more storytelling songs. Was that intentional right away? Because other songwriters go, I want to pour my heart out, I want to share all these things, and there are others that are like, I like to tell this through story.
No, I don't like to emote too much. I write fiction, and I just write fiction through song. It's much more fun to make stuff up.
I heard a story. I think it was Paul McCartney saying when he was writing Martha. And George Harrison was like, what's that about? And he was like, I don't know. I wrote it. And then George Harrison's like, how can you do that? How can you just make something up? And Paul McCartney's like, I don't know. I just can.
Yeah.
And do you find too, when you do that approach of, creating like that, there are just so many more options and you can invent these weird characters and different stories and interesting backgrounds that you can kind of live through a little bit.
Well, exactly. I don't worry about living through them, but I mostly write songs backwards. I get a couple of lines and a melody, and I think, okay, who said that? And I try to envision the character that would have said that, and then maybe there's a story that goes with the character. So I work back from the lines to the story.
Now, you said as you progress too, you've taken on more of the production. Like, do you do the majority of that? Well, obviously now at home, but do you, at what point do you go like, okay, I can demo this out. I can start to lay this out. This has footing. It's got legs, and I can see where this is going to go.
Well, it's really been over 10 years since I produced a record, so I don't really remember how that. And I listen to the stuff now, and I think, damn, you were a better guitar player then than you are now, James. Better practice. But the last couple of records, I did. C.C. Adcock produced Complicated Game, and then we got one in the can right now that Ross Hogarth is currently mixing. And,
that's amazing.
Ross had a lot to do with the arrangements on these. He'd find stuff. He said, "No, take an extra bar there, man, before you sing that line. It'll be more effective." Stuff like that. Stuff that I might have known at some point in the past, but had forgotten. Which is, that's why I'm hiring guys again so I can learn another round of tricks. So if I ever get back to producing myself, then I'll know some things. But I don't know. I don't really want to own enough gear to make a record myself at home.
Oh, that's interesting because sometimes people are the polar opposite. They were like, I want to learn everything so I can do it myself. Do you find like something gets lost from the song? If a person it's just solely them and they're just doing too much?
It depends on who you are. I mean, Prince could do it. I'm just not that interested in the technical aspects of it. That stuff is a means to an end. So, I would at least have to hire an engineer again if I were to produce. And I was fortunate. I worked with Stuart Sullivan on most of the stuff I did. And, the guy's got really good ears. He can tell what needs fixing, and he'll get a good drum sound up before you even do anything. That's something I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go in there and place mics on drums and try to figure that out.
I don't want to do that either.
I can't even hear it,
So do you feel like that, sometimes maybe that's where songwriters or artists struggle because they're trying to wear so many hats, and it's like you kind of have to define the thing that you want to do and just live into it?
I don't know. You can't write a script for yourself. you don't want to be rigid in your parameters, but you do whatever works at the time. I mean, your introduction to me was Candyland. Well, I barely played guitar on that record. I think I played on one song, Dusty Pages. That was my second record. The first record ate up most of the songs I already had, and so when I went in the studio for Candyland, I had 7 songs that were kind of complete, and finished it in the studio, and then wrote a couple more whole songs in the studio. So like all my brain cells at the time went towards songwriting. I didn't have anything left for guitar, but I got the songs written and got the record out, moved on to the next thing. It's kind of with records. You remember that early video game? I think it was called Frogger.
Yeah.
Where you got that little frog and you're trying to hop across a creek on the backs of alligators and turtles. And like every record is to get you to the next gator back. And I don't worry about it too much once it's out and done with. You got to get on to the next thing. But, my business turned more and more into a live touring business than a recording artist. Because when I started out, we toured to promote record sales. Because the model was, you sold a bunch of records and you lived off the artist royalties. Well, I never saw any artist royalties till we can't make it here, because that record was made so cheap and it sold enough that I actually saw artist royalties, not just songwriter. But the business changed. Napster came along, sales fell off. Even big artists couldn't make it on record sales, which was okay for us because by then, we were making it on the road. We had a really stripped down operation, basically 4 guys in a van. I didn't even pull a trailer because I hate trailers. We took the back 2 seats out of the van and piled the gear up back there. So we profited on the road. But after a while, you have to put a record out so that people will write about you in the press. And then that way you can get people into your shows and continue to profit, because otherwise everybody loses interest. So it's like, we used to tour to promote records. Now we make records to promote tours. So that was the pre-pandemic model anyway. I don't know what we're going to do now.
Well, you've been doing live shows and, live shows on the internet, which have been awesome. I've been watching a few of them. Do you feel like you can reach more people all at once? It's kind of like that where it's like somebody sees that you go live automatically, this social media world.
Well, you can. I have to work with much younger people who understand this kind of thing, because I don't really know how to maximize the online thing. I've been talking to some guys. There's something called Sessions that was started by the same guy that started Pandora Radio years ago. And the whole thing with me is just trying to reach more people further away, because it's like in my live shows, I was never a huge draw, but I could fill a 300-seat club pretty much anywhere in the country, and some of Canada, and then in Europe I could fill 100-seat closets all the way across Europe, and that kept me going. That made me viable. Well, now I can do a 1 o'clock live stream here in Texas and still reach people in Europe and reach people in California, but I want to be able to reach all the way around the backside. I want the Asians, I want the Africans, I want to get a little bit of everybody. I don't see why it couldn't be done. I need to talk to these young people to figure out how to do it.
Well, I think you're doing a fantastic job, because these live streams have been awesome. And, I noticed too, like you go for a lot of 12-string guitars. When you're playing a lot, do you have certain tunings that you gravitate towards more when you're writing and you're thinking of ideas?
Well, yeah, I've got some weirdo tunings, and some of which I just stumbled onto. There's that weird open C I use with that Pepto-Bismol colored Guild guitar. It's basically Keith Richards' open C. You do it like 5 strings, open G, capoed on the 4th fret. But unlike Richards, I leave the low string on and tune it down to a C. So I basically have a 1-string bass player there, and I can fret it across the capo. Mm-hmm. And if I fret it on the 4th fret where the capo is, I get a low 4. And I can hammer the 4 chord over it, and it works out pretty nice. Well, I had a hard time figuring out how to do the same thing in D. And I did this because, you could tune that low string to a D, but then you can't reach it from your capoed position.
Yeah.
So I happened to run into David Wilcox, and we did a show together somewhere, Denver Zoo, it was, outdoor thing. And he already knew that tuning. And I said, well, how do you do it in D and be able to fret it? He said, well, you use a second capo, dummy. Oh, okay. So that became what I call the Melinda tuning. And it was when I got to that double capo, open D, weird tuning, that's when I got the song Melinda. It kind of fell out of that guitar in that tuning.
Do you feel like certain tunings or certain picking patterns gravitate you to certain, I don't know, feels or thoughts or lyrical ideas?
It can, yeah. I mean, having a lot of guitars helps because, different guitar hits your brain different. And then you think differently, and you'll get a song that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten. I had a song called Charlemagne's Hometown. I don't play it on the guitar I wrote it on. I wrote it on a baritone. It's when I first got a baritone guitar. And something about those low strings, I think I was playing through a twin or something, and it just put me in mind, brought those lines out. I don't know why. So, yeah, I mean, I like to use as many tones as I can get. I'd like to get an acoustic baritone for those, for the live streams. I'm just kind of afraid to go in a guitar shop right now. You got all these surfaces that people are touching and passing back and forth. And
let's just stay inside for now. Yeah. Do you find when you have those moments of like you feel like I don't have any inspiration or you're trying to draw, what are things that stir it up or just kind of get that creative pot going essentially?
Having a deadline.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, most of the songs I wrote since I had a record deal when songwriting became my job. And sometimes I just flat can't finish a song unless I have to. And there's most of the songs on this new record are that way, which is also why I don't play much guitar on this record, because it's sort of a repeat of Candyland, where I just had to put it all into finishing these songs in time to record them because we had the studio time booked.
But that does make sense because I feel like deadlines are a good thing. Otherwise, there's always this open-ended, like, this song could be finished.
They can be a good thing. But in the old days, back in the Columbia days, it was all around singles, and nobody really cared about songs that weren't going to make singles. And there's some casualties on those early records where I didn't quite finish the song. I stuck words in places to make it sound like it was a song. And they made great tracks, but there's some things on those first two records. Well, the second record, and I would say, Hands Like Rain is just not quite there. It's got nice imagery, but it's less than the sum of its parts. It doesn't quite close. It just doesn't quite make sense. So it was rushed because we had to get it done. But this last record I got lucky. There's no filler on this because there's no need for filler anymore. If you're going to put a record out now, it's going to be on shuffle, and people are going to hear every last song on it. They're not just going to listen 3 songs deep and go on to the next thing.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that record. I still have my tickets to your show at Club Cafe in Pittsburgh when it does happen because I will be there. Because I'm looking forward to it. I have a feeling.
What's the name of that street that goes parallel to the river? Club Cafe is just off of that.
Oh, it's Carson.
Okay, yeah. I saw
Carson.
A picture. I saw like a picture in the news, looking down like that bar on the corner, Carson and 12th, I guess, or is it 12th Street that Club Cafe is off on?
It probably is. It's further down on Carson. That is just the whole area in Pittsburgh where it's nothing but bars. It's just
I really miss it.
Well, I know it will be there, and I'm looking forward to seeing when you get back on the road because you are a phenomenal songwriter. You're kind with your time, and your songs are they're wonderful. They're songs I can just listen on to repeat over and over. Look forward to the new record. And James, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mike.
It's still hard to believe that it's episode 20. We've had so many amazing guests so far. We've got some great ones lined up, some that we've already recorded, we've yet to release. So I just want to say thank you for listening. And if you're enjoying these episodes, if you enjoyed past episodes, please head on over to Apple Podcasts, write a review. Every single review helps us get the name of this podcast out there and spread the word. Share your favorite episode on social media. Tag us at Songwriting for Guitar on Instagram. And if you've got questions, you want guests that you would love to see on here, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at mike@songwritingforguitar.com. That does it for this week. This episode was edited and produced by Chris Fafalius. I'm Mike Myers. Thanks for listening.